and good morning. Happy New Year. This will be our first broadcast of 2026. A very interesting one, as most of us woke up to the news that the U.S. has captured the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, along with along with a few airstrikes that targeted what we are kind of getting reports for. Military bases, oil refineries, and some civilian infrastructure was hit last night in an attack by the American government on Venezuelan soil in Caracas, which is the capital. So I have Senator Black with us today, and we're kind of discuss this event and how we see it. So good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Let me say, am I on screen now?
Okay. Yes, you are.
Yeah, this is very, very dramatic news, and I think we knew that there was going to be an attack on Venezuela, and while I never was comfortable with the idea that we were going to overthrow the government of Venezuela through force, and particularly to get embroiled in another endless war. This is probably, in my personal view, and I know you have your thoughts on it, but it seems to me sort of the best possible outcome where first of all, we didn't have any American troops who were killed or injured even, and while we did bomb at I guess 5 different sites, hopefully there were not a lot of innocent people, and to me, everybody's innocent because we weren't being attacked by anybody, but in any event, I think that this will minimize casualties. I don't think there's going to be some national resistance now that the president has been captured. I think that hopefully this will all transpire smoothly, and we can avoid a big war. We can accomplish whatever aims we set about doing. I do think the drug piece of it is that I don't think that was necessarily the main reason we did this, but I think I'm very pleased by the interdiction of the drug boats. I know there are tremendous controversy about that, but I've always believed in treating the war on drugs as a war and not as just a police investigation. And I think we've done a tremendous job of interdicting the drug traffic for the time being. So anyway, give me your thoughts, because I know you've got everybody's just sort of formulating their opinions on it. Nobody ever expected this outcome, honestly. It was quite startling that you wake up in the morning and the president of Venezuela is captured, and we go from here. What do you think, Morgan?
We spoke backstage, and I told you I'm pretty disappointed in this administration. It's continued, provoking of these conflicts. I had said that Venezuela is this interesting pinpoint to really put our focus on, given if it is about drugs. I think you made the right assessment that this is a bigger goal of getting oil, which I would go further, is that it is really about driving a wedge between Venezuelans' ambitions to become a BRICS member. They are still not a formal member right now, but they were seeking to be one. Were very integral in part of their conferences, and you have China and Russia both engaging in trade deals with Venezuela, which brings me to the point that yesterday you actually had the president's envoy from China actually touched ground in Venezuela, and it's reports that they're still on the ground during the strikes that the Americans took last night, which I find almost, it's not a coincidence. I think that that was done on purpose to send probably a message to the Chinese government that they were locked and loaded and ready to do that at any moment, and they do it probably to maybe even threaten the Chinese government and kind of shaking them to let them know that they could. That's just my speculation there.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting. It's an interesting observation. I was not aware of that state visit, and Morgan, you are a very, very well informed journalist. You know exactly what you're talking about, and I think what one way or the other, whatever you think of it, this is a dramatic reassertion of the Monroe Doctrine. I think it sends a signal, not only in this country, but throughout the world. It sends a signal that the United States will assert its interests in Latin America forcefully, unapologetically, and whatever you think of it, that's the reality. I think it's probably going to send shockwaves overseas, China, Russia, other places, and I think it's going to cause both China and Russia to reassess their objectives within the Western Hemisphere. What do you think? What are your thoughts about Cuba?
In pertaining to their political survivability after this,
the fallout from this, the impact on Cuba.
That's the great point. Is during capturing Maduro throughout history, we've seen when we do destabilize a region in the way of, which I know I will rescind. I think the vice president has taken the role of presidency in Venezuela as of right now, but it has the capacity to create this power vacuum where sometimes you have something worse jump in, which I, with kind of like how in Iraq, how we got the adoption of ISIS through taking out Saddam, which Saddam was not very kind to his citizens, but he also was presenting this crackdown on radical Islam that was not there anymore when he was taken out and allowed ISIS to rise up and give us a worse kind of terror group. That's kind of where my concern is, that you're creating this void that allows for destabilization of a region, more criminal activity, because you don't have, it's just everything's in commotion. That's kind of my worry. I know that the U.S. has set up for this Maria Machado woman to be the next president, but she's not liked by the people, and it's going to be a very hard sell. It's kind of like the Juan Guaido instance that happened in the first Trump administration, where the Western countries all got together and they announced that this Juan Guaido was the legitimate president as opposed to Maduro, and you don't even have citizens that really even knew who this man was.
That was a farce, wasn't it?
Yes.
Juan Guaido had served one term in the legislature. He was elected on a split and on a three-way split, so he didn't even win a majority in his own home district. Nobody knew who he was, and I'm not sure whether it was Vice President Pence that had something to do, but anyway, the word went out. Okay, swear yourself in as president. So he swore himself in as president. Nobody even swore him in. He just conducted this farcical thing. And when the word went out in Venezuela about Guaido, the major reaction was, who is Juan Guaido? Is he from Venezuela? Nobody knew who he was. So now it's interesting when President Trump spoke this morning with Fox News. They asked him about well, is it Maria Machado?
Yeah, Maria Corina Machado. She's
Okay.
the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yes.
Yes, I think in first Trump administration, she had sent a letter to, I believe, the Trump administration as well as the Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, basically saying that she wanted them to really overthrow the country. And I think that there was this video footage of her recently after getting the Nobel Peace Prize of her boasting, encouraging the American government to do land air strikes, so much so that I think you have Julian Assange, who just put out a lawsuit against the Nobel Peace Prize to basically saying that they were no longer holding their duty of giving the Nobel Peace Prize to true peace candidates, given her statements calling for military action in her country, which I found very interesting.
The Nobel Peace Prize has sort of devolved into a way of thanking people for initiating warfare.
Mm-hmm.
They gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Barack Obama before he had really done anything. He was elected as president. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize for being elected, and he went on to be one of the most bloodthirsty presidents in our history. He just spread death and destruction throughout the Middle East, and it continues to reverberate to this day.
Yeah.
So to me, getting the Nobel Peace Prize is sort of like being indoctrinated into the Nazi Party or something. It's just it's not exactly something that you want to be known for. You'd rather be, people don't even consider that. But anyway, it's clear that she was just somebody who came out of the blue. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting that President Trump declined to talk about her as the heir apparent. And he said, we're going to have to see, what comes next. I'm glad to hear that, because I think the best thing that we could do at this point is to support someone who has some credibility with the Venezuelan people, someone who is respected. I don't know who that would be. I don't know enough about it, but someone who has ties with Venezuela, who doesn't come in as a total puppet of the United States. Now, clearly, the United States is going to control what Venezuela does for generations. But you would like someone who could also represent the interest of the Venezuelan people, so that there's some responsiveness to the concerns of the people. But it's clear to me this is a classical case of getting involved in controlling the oil markets. I do think that the drug piece is very real, but that's not why we did it. We did it to control the oil. We've wanted to do it for a long time. But Venezuela, though, it's one thing to seize control of the country. It's another thing to govern and direct it, because nations have cultures, they have histories, they have ways of doing things. Venezuela has always been a very restive place. Richard Nixon, who was very astute at foreign affairs, when he was the vice president, he made a visit to Venezuela, and we needed troops to rescue him. Venezuela is very violent towards the United States, and so the idea, it's one thing to take control and to control the levers of power there. It's another thing to govern the culture. We will not be able to govern the culture. We might influence it, and we've never really in recent history governed the culture of nations in any positive way that I can think of. Usually it's to create chaos, and at least what makes me relatively more supportive about this is that we have not destroyed the entire country. We didn't go in and we didn't level cities. We didn't leave millions of people dead, which is a change in course. And the fact that we went in a surgical way is, to me, I have a sense of relief that we haven't done it. I will say I think Venezuela will not put up any resistance to returning Venezuelans in this immigration situation, where it will make it much easier to deport people. And I suspect, as I think about it, that with Trump's campaign to deport the illegal migrants, I think a lot of them are going to end up in Venezuela now, because they can't claim that Venezuela is a place that they're going to be in danger of, because the United States is going to control it. And so I think it's going to certainly smooth out a lot of the deportations, because if we pick up somebody in El Salvador, or who is an El Salvadoran in the United States, and we order him deported, and he says, "Oh, woe is me, I can't go back to El Salvador because they don't like me," we'll say, "Okay, well, you go to Venezuela." What does he say at that point? There's nothing he can tell the judge that's going to be persuasive. So it is going to facilitate the deportation operation. There are all kinds of fallouts from this that you think of as you begin to, put the pieces together.
Yeah, and you think you mentioning Cuba is interesting, because I know that Marco Rubio, during his tenure of his political career, that has been a lot of what he has sought to disrupt is Cuba. And I find that very interesting, that that's kind of the probably a potential byproduct of what's going to happen with kicking out Maduro. I think what's also interesting is that this closely coincides with Trump and the Benjamin Netanyahu visit at Mar-a-Lago, where he spent around 5 days, where you have, we were going to speak today, before the news had broke, we kind of prepped for a show on Iran, given Trump's locked and loaded tweet that coincided after Benjamin Netanyahu's visit. And you have some of this rumbling while Netanyahu was still there, about the protest. Netanyahu comes Monday. You have the Iran protests that kick off on Wednesday. He leaves Friday, and then Trump makes this post. I find that very interesting. And the other thing that was also spoken about was Venezuela.
Yes, it's a little obscure to me what interest Israel has in overthrowing the government of Venezuela. But it seems that Netanyahu and his backers, the bankers from London and so forth, they have a tremendous interest in warfare and the financial benefits that can accrue from warfare.
Yeah.
Um, and the United States, and this is a whole new topic, but I will say the CIA and Mossad are very active trying to bring about demonstrations in Iran.
Hmm.
And it may be that part of Israel's interest is that if the United States can carry this out, which it has very effectively, it certainly sends shockwaves around the world, and it might give some incentive to demonstrators in Iran. Now, when when Israel and the United States launched their really unprovoked attack against Iran back months ago, um, Mossad had thoroughly infiltrated the country with spies and had established a tremendous spy network, and uh, and they assassinated tremendous number of Iranian officials. And but Iran, when calm was restored, they went after the spy networks with a vengeance. They executed a good number of these agents of Mossad.
Hmm.
And something that they did also was that they expelled 1.5 million Afghan refugees who had really no loyalty to Iran, but they had fled there, and now they were sort of um, prime candidates for undercover operations that were conducted by Mossad. So now, and I spoke with an Iranian man he's Iranian American, and his parents are both American citizens, but they're living in Tehran. And he told me that he was talking to his mother on the phone when suddenly the phone went dead, and it took him a couple of days to reconnect. And she told them that what had happened was that as they were talking on the phone, the attack, the American attack, hit. Well, I don't know whether it's the American or the Israeli. They were sort of interwoven, and they bombs went off in the building just across from his parents' residence, and the phones went out immediately.
Hmm.
The mother was hit by flying glass. Her husband was hurled across the room, and his rib cage was smashed. Um, and Anyway, they both lived, both of them. They both survived, and they later were able to speak to the son. And I asked, I said, well, what is the reaction on the streets? Because it's very rare that you have that kind of uh, first person information. I used to have that with Syria. I had a tremendous network of contacts where I could tell from day to day what the atmosphere was on the street without going through various intelligence agencies that would slant the news or totally distort it as we did. And but it was interesting to get this response that the these particular people who were injured, the parents of this Iranian American, they they were not supporters of the current government over there. Now, that doesn't mean that there were people going out to overthrow the government. It's hard for Americans to understand that other countries have some similarity to ours, where in this country we have people who hate Donald Trump, and they would do anything to get him out of office.
Mm-hmm.
We have other people who love Donald Trump. They do anything to keep him in office. That doesn't mean that every time there's something that happens that suddenly the country is rising up and overthrowing the government. It just means there are different factions. And it's the same thing in Iran. So these people were not supportive of the current government. They wanted change, but the response that they were conveying to their son is that even though there were a lot of people who dislike the current government, that Iranians came together. Because this was an unprovoked attack. It was a surprise attack that was carefully orchestrated to where it would occur while the Iranians felt like they were in peace talks, and they could be comfortable that no one would attack them while the United States is holding peace talks with them. And so that outraged people. And so anyway, you had a coming together of the Iranian people. You also had them purging 1.5 million people who were not reliable. And so the report that I get on the Iranian demonstrations is that none of them have been real big. There was one in Tehran that garnered, I think, a couple thousand people, but that's peanuts. There aren't big demonstrations in any of the major cities, and even the demonstrations in like the Kurdistan area, the Kurds are always restive wherever they are, and even there the demonstrations aren't big to where they're threatening to order. And as long as you control the capital, Tehran is a massive capital. As long as you control the capital, you control the country. And so, I mean, that's aside from what we're doing today. But I'm sure that Netanyahu will be very interested. I think it will give them some incentive to ramp up the spy operations in Iran, and so we'll see what comes about.
Yeah, on the aspect of why I think this is Israel has a vested interest in what goes on in South America is that you have southern countries of South America. You have Argentina, Peru, Chile. All of their governments are very pro-Israel. And by extension of that, you have more of them aligned with the IMF, Western governments, as opposed to BRICS and China and Russia. You go further up north in South America, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, they are more inclined to join BRICS. They don't recognize Israel as a state, and they don't have this. They don't have this, I would say, trust in Western governments and cultures as the southern ones are more inclined to do so with, Argentina and Malay and the likes. So I think that is kind of what gives Israel this vested interest with Venezuela. You have Maria Machado, which Trump said, that's very interesting. I didn't get a chance to hear that. She's gone on air and said that if she is, anointed the president, because she wouldn't ever be elected there, she would recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the embassy there. So it seems like there is this vested interest that Benjamin Netanyahu has to further establish legitimacy to this greater Israel project and their ambitions. I think we see that as well with the recognition of Somaliland, these different. You recognize the northern part of Somalia as its own sovereign state, and in exchange, the de facto government in Somaliland says that they would recognize Israel, move their embassy. It's this kind of this pattern that seems to be taking place, where you have Israel, which, given the history of what we did after World War II, or what even the USSR did, is recognizing these states to further our ambitions, our political goals.
Yes, well, and I'm sure you're correct on that. I want to mention Cuba. I grew up in Miami, so I watched the Cuban Revolution unfold. I was in Cuba twice before the revolution, and once after Fidel Castro was in office. My father was arrested by the Cuban secret police. He was an internal revenue agent for the IRS. He was responsible for the Latin American beat. He traveled all through Latin America and audited U.S. companies. And he worked with Meyer Lansky, who was the founder of Murder Incorporated. He was a major figure in the mafia. He was the financial wizard of the mafia. And because my father audited all of the mafia interests in Cuba, he worked with the powers that be. That's, he audited them. And so I was exposed at a very young age to the culture there in Cuba, to the various factions that supported and opposed Batista. Cuba was a joyous, extremely happy place under Batista, and then he was ousted by Fidel Castro. There was a lot of hope by people that there would be improvement, and it did not work out very well. Now, we never really will know what Cuba might have been, but because of the fact that the Soviet Union at the time put nuclear armed missiles on their territory, we had this tremendous crisis that many people thought risked nuclear war, and that was John F. Kennedy's brightest hour. He had stumbled very badly in some various things that he did, and then he seemed to carry off his negotiations with the Soviet Union very well. He got them to withdraw the missiles. We withdrew our missiles from Turkey and our nuclear missiles. And but from that time forward, there has always been effectively a sort of a semi-blockade on Cuba, and consequently, their economy has been quite dismal. They have had no new vehicles imported into the country since 1959. So the country today is sort of a relic of the 1950s, where you go there and the cars on the street are 59 Chevys or 57 Fords or whatever, but they're all pre-1959 or 59 and earlier. The buildings have not been maintained, so there's tremendous deterioration, tremendous poverty. Although the one strong thing is there's a tremendous law and order. There's very little violent crime in Cuba. So, but I think that as a practical matter, now that they are cut off from the flow of Venezuelan oil. I don't think we're going to see Russia try to rush in and replace the lost oil, because they're going to accept that we've reasserted the Monroe Doctrine. They are not going to, Russia is certainly not going to provoke us by doing what we've done. In other words, they're not going to come to our borders and try to control things on the other side of the world the way that we have done in Ukraine. So I think it's going to leave Cuba with its last and most vital lifeline imperiled, and the government there really is not active opposition in Cuba, but I think that in very short order that Marco Rubio will be working to orchestrate uprisings in Cuba. And I think it just as a very practical matter, I think the Cuban government will fall. And as a practical matter, the people in Cuba have lived in poverty for generations now, in really abject poverty. You will see an influx of money that will be out of this world. Cuba will become this tremendous holiday paradise. Regardless of the rights and wrongs of things, the government, in my estimation, will change in the next two years, and there's this huge economic force out of Miami. The people who moved from Cuba, who took over Miami, made it basically part of the Cuban nation. I mean, in much of Miami, you go into a shop or restaurant and nobody speaks English. It's not that they're bilingual. They've just stopped teaching children to speak English anymore in large parts of Miami, and I've been to Miami every year except when I was in Vietnam. And so I've watched this transformation. And so there's this tremendously powerful economic force out of Miami that will move into Cuba, that will direct everything. They've actually they used to hold seminars. At one time, it looked like the government might change, and they started holding all these seminars. Here's what you do. Here's the way to function. That's going to happen again now that the oil is cut off. I don't think you're going to see a lifeline to Cuba from either China or Russia, just as a practical matter. I think that the cutting of the lifeline to Cuba from Venezuela, it's just a reality. It's sometimes when we're looking at these things, you just look at them in a cold, pragmatic way, and you say, this is the way the world is. So anyway, we've awakened today, and it certainly is a significant change in world events.
Yes, certainly. I think we've probably turning to wrap up now. I want to make a mention. I guess Trump had already spoken on Fox News, but he made a truth post stating that there will be a conference today shortly after we depart from our live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time at Mar-a-Lago, where he will give the public more information on what took place in Venezuela.
Well, Morgan, I want to thank you for being so quick on your toes this morning. We completely rejiggered our schedule, and I think many thanks to you that we've been able to discuss it, I think, intelligently, and there'll be lots more to
Certainly.
cover in the future.
Yes, certainly. And happy New Year to you and your family. And hopefully we'll catch. I want to encourage everybody to tune in next week to focus on the news.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Morgan.
All right. Goodbye.